Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, which is likely because this is only my 6th video ever on YouTube, I'm Alex and this is my channel Frank Fiction, where I talk about pretty much anything I want related to books and the book publishing industry. This is my second wrap-up video that I've ever done. My first one, of course, was in January where I read 3 books. I didn't think that 3 was all that bad, but it wasn't really that great either, and I was hoping that February would kind of be a time for me to reassess and to connect with myself again and begin my reading goal for the year anew. That didn't happen. Work was incredibly stressful for me. I had a family member who went into the hospital who is still in the hospital. My birthday was last month and it ended up being a really stressful birthday. So to be completely honest with you, February was a mess. And if you would like to know how things are going now in the second week of March, I, as a general principle, do not drink coffee after 10:30 in the morning. There's some days I don't drink coffee at all because it makes me turn into Tweak from South Park. But I ended up going to Starbucks and getting a venti shaken espresso that has like 5 shots of espresso in it at 4 p.m. I think that pretty much sums up my life right now. I just wanted to feel something for like 5 minutes. I also feel like I've deeply neglected all of the videos that I wanted to make. I have so badly wanted to sit down and do some filming because I genuinely find this fun. This is a creative outlet for me in my life to get away from all of the other crazy stuff that I have to do, you know, as part of just general living. I only have 2 books to talk about, and I know that you could go to any other booktuber and you could watch them give their monthly wrap up and they'll have read between like 6 and 12 books in a month. I know I don't have a lot. The quantity is not there, but the quality is. Both of the books that I read this month were actually really good, and I would highly recommend both of them, and those books are Gilchrist by Christian Gallagher, which I read digitally so I don't have a physical copy, and then The Bees by Layleen Paul. And you can see I actually made some notes in here. I did take notes for the second part of the book, but they were all digitally on my phone, so that's why the post-it stopped. But I'm really looking forward to talking with you all about this, and so just bear with me and we'll dive right in. Gilchrist is the story of Peter and Sylvia, whose marriage is completely deteriorating after the death of their infant son, Noah. Peter, in an attempt to save their marriage, decided that he was going to rent a cabin in a town that has been calling to him in his dreams, and that town is Gilchrist, Massachusetts. Supernatural and unexplained things start to happen to the couple after they get into town, and while they're not good things, the couple also doesn't really want to leave because there's something about the town that makes them feel rejuvenated and fresh, a way that they haven't felt in a really long time. Now, if you have ever read a Stephen King book like me, allow me to enlighten you on all of the ways that Gilchrist is like a King book. I actually have a list for you. There's a gifted child with the ability to see things that others can't. There's an evil that feeds on the fear and misery of the town. The creatures in the book are interdimensional beings. There's a boy that is controlled by an evil that turns him into a serial killer. It's set on the East Coast, and it's character driven and set in the 3rd person, which admittedly isn't unique to King, but it is something that is characteristic of his writing and something that I noticed. I would also highly recommend this book to anybody who is a fan of the movie In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, like I am. That's one of my all-time favorite movies, and this book reminded me a lot of that. The writing is very descriptive and well-paced, even though the story was over 500 pages long, and honestly that was a surprise to me because it was a digital copy. I didn't realize until I opened it how long it was, and I was a little concerned after I realized the length, but I gotta tell you, this book just really, it flies by. The gore in the story is effective because it's used sparingly, so it's not happening every other page, but when it does happen, it makes you go, oh! You feel a lot for the characters in those scenes. I also really appreciated that Gallagher's ending wasn't cheap. Now, I'm not going to include anything spoiler related in this review, but what I will tell you is a lot of stories, what they do is they end up having the main characters face off against the big bad, and ultimately, somehow the main characters end up winning. And you kind of know going in that the characters are going to win. This isn't one of those stories, because you could get to the end and argue that the characters don't win at all. And the entire story takes place over the course of about a week, so it is pretty fast-paced, as I said. And I'll also say that I definitely plan to read Gallagher's other works, and that I overall gave this book 4 stars. All right, The Bees. Now, I have had this book for 8 years. You're gonna notice a pattern if you watched my wrap up from January that I've had a lot of books for 8 years. Why that specific amount of time, I honestly don't really know. It's just the way that it's worked out. I got this book when I went on a trip to London in 2015, and I bought it from a bookstore that was called Foyles. If any of you have ever been to Foyles, then you know that it's really cool because it's a multi-story bookstore. I think they had like 4 or 5 levels in there, and this caught my eye because as anybody who is a friend or family member watching this video knows, that I am an absolute freak about bees. I started studying bees back when I was in high school. A friend of mine, they ended up getting some hives and they allowed me to come with them to a beekeeping class, and I fell in love and I have been learning about them ever since. So I got this and I held off on reading it because honestly I think I was a little worried that I wouldn't end up liking it and that it was going to be a letdown and a disappointment, but it wasn't. It ended up being a lot better than I expected. So here we go. This is the story of Flora 717, who is a sanitation bee born with a type of mutation. Usually sanitation workers are only fit to clean the hive and can't even speak, but when Flora is born, she can not only speak, but also produce a very valuable substance called royal jelly, which the bees refer to as flow. Because she is able to produce this valuable substance, she did not get destroyed for her mutation and instead got transferred from being a sanitation bee to that of working in the nursery. Later, a heroic act ends up actually putting her in front of the queen of the hive, which is considered a great honor. She soon discovers that something is very wrong with the hive and that she herself is harboring a secret that is considered a great betrayal to the queen. What's really funny about this book is that it was promoted as The Handmaid's Tale meets The Hunger Games, and while I personally wouldn't have described it that way, I can honestly see what they're getting at. Flora possesses all of the characteristic trappings of a dystopian hero. She's born unique but of low bearing, ends up drawing attention to her special abilities, and earns the ire of the upper class workers that feel that she doesn't belong with them. Now, this might come as a surprise to you, but the author had to take some liberties with how bees actually behave. Shocker, I know. And I recognize in order to create a narrative about anthropomorphic bees, a writer would need to change some details in order to create an engaging story, or in fact create a story at all. But there is a pretty glaringly wrong detail about honeybee hives that I need to just go ahead and get out of the way. Honeybees do not have classes the way that ant colonies do. You probably didn't expect to sign up for Animal Planet and Discovery Channel today, but here we are, so buckle up, Buttercup, we got a lot to talk about. Honeybees follow what is instead called temporal polythism, which is where their role in the hive changes with their age. So younger honeybees end up being nurses and older honeybees end up being foragers. So eventually, over the life cycle of a bee, they perform pretty much every role that is in the hive. So Flora, being a sanitation worker and supposedly needing to be a sanitation worker her whole life, is just not the way that hives work. So basically the entire plot of this novel is based on something that's just wrong. Now, I did take issue with that in the beginning because my thought was, if Paul got that detail, a fundamental detail of a beehive wrong, how much else in this book is going to be wrong? But as I continued to read, I recognized that she actually did a lot of research, and I read in her acknowledgments that she had contact with different biologists and people who told her a lot about actual beehive behavior. Why certain details are wrong, I don't know if it was just because of artistic license or because the biologist told her something that was wrong. I'm leaning more towards the realm of artistic license. If you end up really being interested, I did actually do a breakdown of all of the things correct and all of the things that are wrong with this book in a blog post. I've been running a book review blog for many years now, and I will include that post down below just in case you would like to do a deep dive. If you do end up reading that blog post, you might argue that for not being an entomologist, I know entirely too much about bees, and my response to that is, I will not apologize for the abstract expressionism that is my brain. I didn't choose the bee life chose me, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk. One of the things I appreciate the most about this story is how Paul seems to go through the seemingly endless list of things that are threats to honeybees. And ultimately what she's getting at is colony collapse disorder, which is the combination of all of the factors that are contributing to the deaths of honeybees every year. Bees play a vital role in maintaining a healthy ecosystem and for pollinating most of our food. So any form of media really, even if it gets details wrong that draws attention to the plight of the honeybee, is something that's going to be positively received by me. If this was a dry manual about like actual honeybees and their existence, like my beekeeper's Bible, I can guarantee you almost nobody would read that. But in this form, it's going to reach a larger audience, and that means that maybe even with its wrong details, it's going to be more effective in spreading the word about why honeybees deserve to be protected. This is a rather emotional narrative, and Flora is a pretty relatable character, so maybe this type of story would end up making people who are allergic to bees and or afraid of bees feel like they're not just insects, but living, breathing creatures that have a reason for being here. I enjoy Paul's prose and deep emotions in this story. Flora is a feisty and independent character, and someone that I think most people would be able to relate to. I found myself sitting on the edge of my seat wondering how this story was going to resolve, and that to me is always the sign of a great narrative. I would honestly recommend this even if you aren't weirdly interested in honeybees the way that I am, but I will tell you that if you're ever interested in talking about them or you want to learn any more about them, please do reach out to me, because everyone who knows me knows that I will talk about bees as much as you want, which might be not at all, and that's okay. Just don't get me started. Too late. With regards to this book, just take certain details with a grain of salt, and overall I give this a 4.5. And that is all I have for you today. So if you ended up making it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you for hanging out with me. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.